Happy Friday, guys. Today we're going to look at the middle colonies. There are 4 colonies that make up the middle colonies: New York, New Jersey, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. But we're going to focus pretty heavily looking at New York and Pennsylvania. Sorry, New Jersey and Delaware. So one of the things that we want to think about is our discussion earlier in the week about the Dutch settling and the creation of the New Netherlands. As you can see on this map, the river, this is what we call the Hudson River, and the Dutch will settle along the Hudson River in large estates. And then we have the settlement down here of New Amsterdam, which eventually becomes New York City. Remember, the Dutch were commonly known for their trade with the American Indians. Especially for fur. There's also a lot of trade going on in New Amsterdam. And don't forget about the Iroquois Confederacy in upstate New York, as well as the fact that the Dutch were relatively tolerant and welcoming of others, which leads to a pretty diverse community in the New Netherlands. So what's going to ultimately happen is that the New Netherlands will be sandwiched between 2 British colonies, and the British decides that they want this. So in the 1660s, there's a little war, and ultimately England's going to gain control of this. The guy responsible for it was a guy by the name of the Duke of York, and hence we get the founding of New York. Even though the British will remain in charge of this area, they're going to keep a lot of the Dutch tradition. So the tolerance and diversity stays, the fur trade, the agriculture. We're not going to see any drastic changes because this move was primarily about money. So keep that in mind, that we're going to see quite a commerce economy bustling out of the colony of New York. The fur trade will still be pretty active, and we'll see a pretty diverse and tolerant population in the colony of New York. As we head south from New York, we're going to find the colony of Pennsylvania. The guy to the right is William Penn, and he is going to create Pennsylvania as a place for Quakers to be able to practice their faith freely. The Quakers were a small religious group in England, and he was a member of this organization. The Quakers are really unique. They are pacifists. They don't believe in war. They also believed in fair treatment of the American Indians, and they're one of our very first groups that is going to take a stance on slavery and be against it. In fact, some of our early anti-slavery organizations will be formed by the Quakers. So that's a pretty cool feature given the time period. You're talking the early 1700s. One of the neat things that William Penn does is he places advertisements in European newspapers throughout the continent, and he recruits settlers to come to the New World. So we end up with a pretty diverse population. In another slide, we're going to look at all the groups that come to the middle colonies, but one of the largest groups will be Germans. So we'll see both religious and ethnic diversity in Pennsylvania. Economically, Pennsylvania, just like New York, is a blend of the New England and Southern colonies, so they'll have a very active trade, but they will also focus really heavily on agriculture. Pennsylvania is what we call our bread colony, so there's a lot of grain being grown here. This picture should look kind of familiar. It should look like the guy that's on Quaker Oats, and that's an easy way to remember this. There's also livestock, fur trade, timber. So this is a really active economy and pretty strong one at that. I mentioned earlier that the Quakers believed in the fair treatment of American Indians, which really sets them apart from some of the other groups that have come. As more and more people come to Pennsylvania, the Quakers will be outnumbered, and so those policies will never really take hold in a long-standing fashion because they are outnumbered. And then Philadelphia is the large city in Pennsylvania. In fact, will actually be the largest colonial city and the most beautiful city as well. And we'll see in our next unit, a lot of our big revolutionary meetings will occur in Pennsylvania. This map will help you visualize the colony of Pennsylvania. You will see that Philadelphia is down in the southeast corner. It'll also help you visualize its proximity to Maryland and New York. And we will see eventually a lot of people that live in the backcountry of Pennsylvania. To wrap up the middle colonies, we really need to know that this is an area that had a pretty strong economy based on trade, but also looking at agriculture as well. As I mentioned earlier, as part of what we call our bread colonies. We know that it's very diverse. This is due largely to the Dutch and also William Penn's efforts to encourage migration to the New World. And ultimately, the middle colonies will be famously known for not only having a strong economy, but a very diverse population and very tolerant of other people. And this is really what makes the middle colonies stand out. Another thing to note, the middle colonies in a lot of ways are a blend of New England and your southern colonies. They have the strong trade of your New England colonies, but they also have very strong agricultural economy as well. We mentioned grain, but we also think about wood, tobacco, we mentioned fur, lumber. So they have a pretty wide and diverse economy as well. And that's it for your middle colonies.